Now Absalom, David's son, had a beautiful sister whose name was Tamar, and after a time Amnon, David's son, loved her. And Amnon was so tormented that he made himself ill because of her sister Tamar. For she was a virgin, and it seemed impossible to Amnon to do anything to her. But Amnon had a friend whose name was Jonadab, the son of Shimei, David's brother. And Jonadab was a very crafty man. And he said to him, "O son of the king, why are you so haggard morning after morning? Will you not tell me?" Amnon said to him, "I love Tamar, my brother Absalom's sister." Jonadab said to him, "Lie on your bed and pretend to be ill. And when your father comes to you, say to him, 'Let my sister Tamar come and give me bread to eat, and prepare the food in my sight, that I may see it and eat it from her hand.'" So Amnon lay down and pretended to be ill. And when the king came to see him, Amnon said to the king, "Please let my sister Tamar come and make a couple of cakes in my sight, that I may eat it from her hand." Verse 7. Then David sent home to Tamar, saying, "Go to your brother Amnon's house and prepare food for him." So Tamar went to her brother Amnon's house, where he was lying down. And she took dough and kneaded it and made cakes in his sight and baked the cakes. And she took the pan and emptied it out before him, but he refused to eat. And Amnon said, "Send out everyone for me." So everyone went out. Then Amnon said to Tamar, "Bring the food into the chamber, that I may eat it from your hand." And Tamar took the cakes she had made and brought them into the chamber to Amnon her brother. But when she brought them near to him to eat, he took hold of her and said to her, "Come lie with me, my sister." She answered him, "No, my brother, do not violate me, for such a thing is not done in Israel. Do not do this outrageous thing. As for me, where could I carry my shame? And as for you, you would be one of the outrageous fools in Israel. Now therefore, please speak to the king, for he will not withhold me from you." But he would not listen to her, and he, being stronger than she, he violated her, and he lay with her. Then Amnon hated her with a very great hatred, so that the hatred with which he hated her was greater than the love which he had loved her. And Amnon said to her, "Get up, go." But she said to him, "No, my brother, for this wrong in sending me away is greater than the other that you did to me." But he would not listen to her. He called the young man who served him and said, "Put this woman out of my presence and bolt the door after her." Now she was wearing a long robe with sleeves, for thus were the virgin daughters of the king dressed. So a servant put her out and bolted the door after her, and Tamar put ashes on her head and tore the long robe that she wore, and she laid her hands on her head and went out, crying aloud as she went. And her brother Absalom said to her, "Has Amnon your brother been with you? Now hold your peace, my sister. He's your brother. Do not take this to heart." So Tamar lived a desolate woman in her brother Absalom's house. When King David heard of all these things, he was very angry. But Absalom spoke to Amnon neither good or bad, for Absalom hated Amnon because he had violated his sister Tamar. Be seated. Let's pray. Lord, we have a lot of text before us this morning. And I pray that you would give vigor to my preaching, that I'd be faithful to every verse, every word, every meaning, and that you ultimately be glorified. But these listeners, they be challenged and comforted at the same time. Help them to contemplate these truths that are here in your scripture. We pray in the name of Christ. Amen. Well, boy, a new chapter today, and some of you might be like, "I just can't wait to move on to like greener pastures. I can't wait to see people making some great choices. I can't wait to see us having a reprieve from sin and things are going easily and smoothly." Well, that's not this chapter. What we are seeing is, it seems in verses 1 to 6 that apples don't fall too far from trees. It seems that chips are emanating from the proverbial block. Don't we see that? What this text is saying in the opening of chapter 13 is Absalom, David's son, had a sister. We're seeing two siblings. I only have sisters. I only have daughters. And so what we see here is this juxtaposition of sons and daughters. Now, in the case of the multiple wives that David had, he had multiple wives that provided for him multiple children, and some were male, some were female. Absalom and Tamar were brother and sister. Amnon is not equal brother. His mother is different. So the text is set up here with this reality of this opening. And in this opening, we see that David has sons. Absalom is the son number 3. Amnon is son number 1. And if we know in antiquity, the oldest son would typically be in line in the patriarchal kingship succession, that Amnon would be the son to succeed David when his time on the throne is expired. So he's obviously the heir apparent. Absalom is son number 3. Now, the text is intentional to say that of this Tamar, that she is what? She's beautiful. She's a beautiful girl. We already see the cliff, don't we? The cliff is right there. And wisdom would dictate that we don't get close to the edge. But a lot of us always aren't so wise. And again, here's Amnon, this first son, the heir apparent. He says, the text says, that he was tormented. Like we use this word tormenting, like in regards to things of evil or possession or some kind of oppressive state. But it's really heavy. And the text says he was tormented. So bad was his desire for his sister that he couldn't find rest. All he wanted was to have his lust satisfied with his own sister. Like if there was going to be the fodder for daytime television, this would be one of the episodes. As we had seen with the one with David observing Bathsheba on the roof. The scene is set. He loved his half-sister, but it was lust. This lust made him sick. The text says there's also a character in here named Jonadab. What I'm going to do for you today is through the 5 people in this text, I'm going to show you through a profile of them how each of them reacted to this scene and or participated in this scene that I think will be very instructive for us. And as regards this friend Jonadab, it says that he would be a relative of David's, the son of Shemaiah. And the text says that he was crafty. Crafty. If I look over at Josh and I know him as a Marine, I say, man, that Josh guy, he's crafty. Like, is that to his credit necessarily? It's really not. If you would say, man, I love The Rock, but my pastor, he's a little bit crafty. Like I don't want you to explain me that way. Like, right? I prefer to use other words. Well, that's Jonadab. He's crafty, he's smart, but not in the sense that we would want him to be. Crafty and wise, again, not in the worldly sense. I'm not in the biblical sense, but in the worldly sense, that he is. See, he sees that Amnon is a mess. He says, like, why are you so haggard? That's a great word, right? Like, why are you so haggard day after day? Like your countenance is revealing that you are not well. And he's like, oh, I love my sister. I can't have her. I made myself sick over wanting her. My desire is so strong for her, and I can't have her. And I don't know how I could get her into my bed. I'm going sick over it. And she says, well, I have a plan for you. Why don't you feign that you're sick? Why don't you pretend to be ill? And then in your feigned illness, that you will ask your dad to send her into you to make you food. And as she's making you food, now you have the opportunity. The situation is ripe for you to take her and have her as you've so wanted her. And so the text goes on to say that Amnon lay, verse 6, he lay sick, pretending to be sick. You remember a number of chapters ago that it was in the previous book, in the antecedent book, which is 1 Samuel, where David also pretended something. What did he pretend? He had dribbled saliva coming off his lip. He was going to live with the Philistines to be able to have safety from what was happening around him and Saul. And so he hid out with them, pretending to be something that he's not. Well, here he's pretending to be sick. He's not sick. He has a diabolical plan in view. And so David comes and said, son, what's wrong? I don't feel good. Send my sister to me. Send my sister to me so that she can nurture me and make food for me. And then I will feel better. And we know how this is like. Like if any of us are sick or ill, like there's a common food that a lot of us like to make for people when we're sick. It's like chicken noodle soup, right? Like we believe that that's a miracle food. Like we do that and we feel better. So he's saying, send my sister, and she's known for making that meal, and I think it will lift my spirit. So of course the dad will oblige. He will oblige her, and he will tell the daughter, you need to go to him. Now, what is unfolding before you, again, as I labor these opening comments, is we're watching the first cut. We're participating in the first incision. We're seeing the first wound of that prophecy of Nathan, where he said, because of this thing that you have done, David, the sword will not depart from your house. We're seeing the first cut of the sword. We're seeing it here very clearly. And what Nathan said would occur is going to occur. And with David's own son, with his own flesh and blood. And I got to tell you here, I've watched many a parent suffer grievously due to the choices of their children. Hurt, pain, toil, tears, lament, difficult. But the inverse is also true. I've watched many children suffer grievously due to the poor, immature, wrong choices made by parents. We all can think of these situations in our lives, can't we? The answer is affirmative. Well, I want to give you 5 things to write down, and let's start with number 1. I think the first thing that we can see from our text this morning is, number 1, we can see the power and the plague of sin. We can see the power and the plague of sin. And this is referring to Amnon. Amnon, that son who is so full of lust, that he's controlled by his lust. He can do nothing else except feed and give in to his lust. This is Amnon. See, sin wants to be satisfied. Sin is not content with sitting idly by. Sin always wants to be satisfied. It's always going to push and enslave and dominate. This is the power of sin, which is why we need the gospel of Christ Jesus to help us see what the remedy is. Amnon is the sign and signal for us of the power and the plague of sin, and of the worst kind, too, incestual relationship with a family member. Proverbs 5:22 says, the iniquities of the wicked ensnare him, and he is held fast in the cords of his sin. John 8:34 in the New Testament says, Jesus says, truly, truly, I say to you, everyone who practices sin is a slave to sin. You know, the contrast between a slave and a master is the sin. The master, rather, makes all the choices. The slave doesn't choose. The slave simply responds to the demands. And this is the picture of sin, because it is a power and it is a plague, and it doesn't go away. It is there forcefully and violently so. And regarding Tamar, the text says she's beautiful. And this, of course, incites in the brother his lust. Like he's just sickened by her. What we also see in Amnon is there's no logic in his decision making. There's no moral high ground for which him should take. He doesn't ascend there. No, he swoops and remains in zero morality. What a wicked concoction that we see due to the power and the plague of sin. The second thing we immediately see is regarding the persuasion of sinners. Number 2, the persuasion of sinners. Here I'm referring to the person Jonadab. Jonadab, this wise and crafty person. See, Jonadab is no friend to Amnon, really. Think about it. Is he really his friend? Would you want Jonadab as a friend? Some of you have Jonadab as friends. He's no friend to Tamar. He's doing her no favors by helping her. And he's certainly no friend to the Lord. He's inciting this act. He's advancing this act. He's party to this act. He's the motivation to make sure it happens. This is Jonadab. He's a world seeker. He's not a kingdom pursuer. So we see here the power or the persuasion of sinners. And what does Amnon do? He drinks his poison. He drinks his poison. I ask you this question here. Who's counseling you? Who are you going to for counsel? in your inventory of your friends and your close associates, when you are struggling with something or when you are just navigating life on a simple basis, who are you getting your input from? Or rather, who's giving you their output? Is it a Jonadab type? Or is it a Nathan type who will tell you the hard things? Who will love you and care for you enough to say the things that you need to hear? A lot of us could do with a lot less Jonadabs in our life. And some of our lives reflect that we have had too many Jonadabs and too few Nathans. This reflects and reinforces the persuasion of sinners. Job 15:34 says, the company of the godless is barren, and fire consumes the tents of bribery. We can see the power here. Proverbs 27:6 says, faithful are the wounds of a friend. Profuse, endless, multiplied are the kisses of an enemy. This is Jonadab. This is the persuasion of sinners. Dale Davis, the commentator, who says things that I've really just learned to really appreciate him to such a great degree. He says, of those in chapter 13, Jonadab we're to watch out for in our own life. He says, quote, this: Jonadab has the skill to leak evil everywhere. He's dangerous because he has skill without scruple, wisdom without ethics, insight without integrity. This is Jonadab. This is Jonadab. Well, you know, we can see this kind of idea of this horrible nature of sin and sexuality that's happened before. Elsewhere, Dinah was raped by Shechem. That's Genesis 34. Elsewhere, we can see that Tamar was involved in a incestuous relationship with Judah. We can see this kind of ugliness happens. The whole story from Genesis chapter 3 to this end, to this side of our Bible, and into now is the continual story of sin. We can't avoid it. Its power, its plague, its presence, the persuasion, it's everywhere. Which is reminding us of our great need for Jesus. But that's not on the focus yet. So we get to verse 7 and 14. Then David sent home to Tamar. See, in antiquity, these multiple children did not live all in one home. If you have 3 kids, they live with you in their age until they depart to have their own families. In antiquity, you did not all live together. So they would be separate. And wives, gals, were typically not wholly with their brothers. There was a kind of separation. There was a distance here. And so he tells the daughter of his, hey, go to your brother. He's not feeling well. And so she goes because she wants to serve her brother, half-brother, and she sees him lying down. Remember, this is a feigned illness. He's not sick. He just wants her goods and not the goods that she could prepare. And she takes dough and she kneads it and she makes him the special food. And in the midst of this, he sends out his servants. He takes out the witnesses. He takes out those who would say, what are you doing? Who might come to her aid, who might give him some semblance of wisdom. He takes them away because sin functions well in what? Private. Sin functions well in the dark. Sin doesn't do so well when everybody can see. And so he sends them out. And then he takes the next step and says, bring the food into my chamber. And Tamar takes the cake she had made and brings them. And then, of course, he beckons her closer and closer and closer, and then makes his request to her, which makes her frightened, confused, and vulnerable. What does the text say? She's like, no, don't do this. Don't do any of this. Come lie with me, my sister. No, don't do this. No, brother. People of Israel, God's chosen people, don't act this way. We don't make these kind of choices. God has set us apart. We're different. We are markedly different. We are not the same. We're not like the world that practices this kind of act. Please, don't do this. Don't be like a fool. And what about me? What would I do with my shame? Don't do this. And if you really, really want me, then ask Dad. Maybe Dad will give me to you. Ask him. And then you can have what you want. Again, you can see her frightened and confused and hurt and feeling very afraid. Notice, too, that she tries to appeal to logic. She tries to remind of the consequences, which, again, if you're like me, I've known full well about the potential consequences. But because of the power of sin, I do what I do. Anyone know what I'm talking about? Just me? Okay, great. I feel wonderful. 2 people. Thank you. Praise the Lord. This plan hatched, and she's trying to say, don't do this. She even quotes the law in some semblance, and she says, Israelites, don't do this. Leviticus 18:9 in the Old Testament reminds us, you shall not uncover the nakedness of your sister. Deuteronomy 27:22 would further add, cursed be anyone who lies with his sister. Like any of us men, like men, we deal with lust, more so than women. But most of us don't lust after our sister. Now, mind you, that doesn't make you better. Because the New Testament says if you even look on a woman, you're as guilty as having committed adultery already. So we're no better. We just recognize the vile nature of what is happening here. He says, don't be a fool. In Israel, don't do this, brother. That word is nebalim in the Hebrew. And nebalim in Hebrew is where we get the name Nabal. Nabal, who was the husband of Abigail, that fool who did not honor those who came to him looking for help. Don't be a fool. Don't be like Nabal. Genesis 34:7 would again reinforce this thing. Don't do this. Don't do this outrageous thing. And then she says again, ask Dad to give me to you. And maybe she hears thinking of Abraham and Sarah, because Abraham and Sarah were such a similar relationship. They were halves. Because the scripture would already enjoin that this is not to happen. Maybe she's thinking there's an acceptive clause there. Really, I don't think that's what it is. I think what we can see here is she is just feeling like a rabbit in the mouth of a wolf. She's trying anything to take away this potential mess. And she's just desperately trying everything. You know, I'm the pastor full-time of the Rock, and it's my great privilege. I also have an ag business that I participate in, that I own, and we deal with the agriculture industry as regards growing leafy green vegetables. And my employees and what we do is we are also contracted to do food safety. And one of the things that it happens in food safety is we get hired to trap or do animal mitigation from leafy green vegetable fields. And what we do is we set out live animal traps to trap predatory animals from traipsing through leafy green fields to prevent them from getting in the field and causing damage and food safety issues. And so the reason that traps are so effective is because they hold the animal, and that's the power of sin. But I just made the reference of a comment of a rabbit in a wolf's mouth. She's like that rabbit, because if you trap an animal, typically they're not very vocal until they're in the jaws of something. And like in the case of a rabbit, if you ever heard a rabbit squall or squeal, typically it's when there's a predatory animal that has it in its grips. And it's not squealing because that hurts. Like, that's not that kind of pain. The reason an animal will squeal when it's in the mouth of a predatory animal is because they're using that language, that vocal scream, so that other predatory animals will hear that and come and then distract the animal, the wolf, so that it will drop the animal, and that animal will have a chance to get away. That's what she's doing. She's just trying to get away from this predator who's trying to do everything he's doing to take her. That's all she's doing. His lust is blinding him. His animalistic passions are overtaking him, and he overtakes her. Well, compounding this injury in verses 15 to 19. His lust that was feigned as love now turns to revulsion, turns to hatred, disdain. He can't stand her now. So much for love. So much for, this is sibling rivalry to the nth degree, and it's not even a rivalry, it's just raw hatred for his own flesh and blood in the half sense. He says, get out. And she's begging him, don't do this. Don't do this. No, my brother, this is wrong. Now you want to send me away after violating me? This is worse. And you're going to see why it's worse in just a minute. But he would not listen. See the power and the plague of sin? And so he called the young man to him. Now he'll take his servants. Get this woman, get this refuse, get this pablum away from me. I don't, just trash. And the text says that she was wearing a long robe with sleeves. She's begging for anything but this. Because to be raped is one thing, right? And again, I will do everything I can to bring justice to a woman who has been raped. Right? That is just wrong in all counts. And look at how he treats her here, which is typical of what we would see in psychological profiling of people who have performed acts like this. It's psychological. It's not love. And she is beside herself. Don't do this. Then she's treated like trash. Amnon's depravity is deep. It's deep and it's devilish. Which takes me to my third point. We see the pain and the ruin of being sinned against. We see the pain and the ruin of being sinned against. See, Tamar is now unmarriable. She's unmarriable. And that's what you are learning in this dialogue that she's having, why she says, don't do this. This is worse. Where will I go? How will I deal with my shame? That's why she tears her garment. Because her garment was one of purity. In Asian culture, at the modern, virginity is highly regarded and esteemed. But in today's culture, not so much. Not so much. And she's saying, by her tearing her garment, she's saying, so much for my purity. So much for my value as a potential suitor for a husband. So much for that. It's gone. It's over. And she weeps and she's beside herself. Like, what am I going to do? See, Tamar now cannot be married. Leviticus 21:14. A widow or a divorced woman, or a woman who has been defiled, these he shall not marry. Deuteronomy 22:13-15. If any man takes a wife and goes into her and then hates her and accuses her of misconduct and brings a bad name upon her, saying, I took this woman, in other words, I thought she was a virgin, and when I came to her, I did not find in her evidence of virginity. What this is referring to is in antiquity, the valuable possession of a father regarding the daughter's purity was the soiled bedsheet. See, in a virgin woman, when her hymen was perforated, she would bleed. And so the signal sign was the redded sheet. And so now, if she would ever be taken as a wife, the sheet would not be reddened. It would be white. This is her lament. This is her reality now. This is a terrible situation. It's horrible. That's why she said, don't put me out. Don't put me out. This is worse. This is horrible. He needed to marry her, potentially, which is one of the things that we can see prescribed in Deuteronomy 22 and verse 28 and 29. If a man meets a virgin who is not betrothed, and he seizes her and lies with her, and they are found, then the man who lay with her shall give to the father of the young woman 50 shekels, and shall be his wife, because he has violated her. Again, are you seeing this person of Amnon? Like, he's diabolical, but again, he's no worse than me and he's no worse than you. Because sin alienates us in all of its forms, every kind of it. She will carry this pain and ruin forever. Now, I must say here, because if you've been with us for the last many months, and especially the last 5 weeks, something about these few passages just don't seem right to us. And I'm not saying they're wrong. I'm just saying we're human and we're finite and we struggle to make sense of this all. And we think back of Paltiel. Paltiel was the husband of Michael. I think that's right. Yeah. And man, I get names all up in my head. And when David calls back his wife to come to him, she already had a husband. And the text says that he is following her at a distance as she's being taken away from him to go to her husband, to go to David. And he's turned around like, go home. Get out of here. Quit following her. She's not yours anymore. Like, that doesn't seem right to us, does it? What also doesn't seem right was just a couple of weeks ago when Bathsheba was bathing on the roof, and David took her while her husband was out working, slaving in military fashion. And he was so honorable when he got called in from the battle, and he was there, and he slept outside. He would not go in and sleep with his wife. He would not enjoy the comforts of his own bed because he cared about Israel. He cared about the war. He cared about the king. He said, no, I will protect you instead. David tries everything. And so David kills him. Like, that doesn't seem right. And then we also recoil at the fact that that innocent child that came at the union of David pursuing Bathsheba, that baby at day 7 dies. Doesn't seem right that an innocent child would die. It doesn't seem right that Tamar cannot get married. Does it? Doesn't seem right. Shows us the power of sin. Shows us that sin has real consequences. And we ought to be cognizant of them in every area, in every turn. Her garment torn signals her loss of purity, value, status as a viable wife. And she mourns, the text says, with her hand on her head. And I've done this, and you've done this. Have you ever watched something horrible, and you're like, ah! Right? We do this. It's a sign of grief. It's like shock. Like, how could this happen? An accident, the most horrible news that comes to your house in the middle of the night. It's like, no. This is her. So terribly sad. But sin is not on your side, church. It's not on your side. It's not looking to make you feel good. It's making to bring you horror. Well, in verses 20 to 22, we close the text with the last 2 biblical parties, Absalom and David. Now, Absalom, the brother, is her actual brother. All of my sisters are half-sisters. Actually, that is not even right because I was adopted. So they're in my case, they're just cousins because I was adopted by my uncle. And Absalom and Tamar are brother and sister. And Absalom, in verses 20 and 22, notices his sister's countenance. And he just knew, like, something happened here. Like, something was wrong. This is wrong. And he says, has my brother been with you? Now, of course, the answer, we collect and assume the answer, yes. But what does he say? Hold your peace, my sister. He's your brother. Do not take this to heart. I don't think he's trying to say, it's nothing, you'll be fine. I don't think that's what he's saying. I think what he's conveying to her is, you're not responsible for what choices he made. This was not in your heart to inculcate, nor design, nor carry out, nor execute, nor participate this. Do not take it to heart. Don't own this. It's ugly, and I concede that. But you are not responsible for this. And the text says, Tamar lived a desolate woman in her brother Absalom's house. And of course, he's upset with Amnon, the text says. As he would go around Amnon, he would speak neither good or bad. In other words, he would have some posture of neutrality. Wouldn't say nothing good or bad. But we'll see later where this goes. But here, at least, where we are myopically focused, he just says nothing, other than we know he hates him. And the text, and notice that verse 21 is so terse. When King David heard these things, he was very angry. Then we jump right into verse 22. Just right away. No extended comment. We just have verse 21 with brevity. Which takes me to number 4. And let's recap. Number 1, we see the power and the plague of sin. Number 2, we see the persuasion of sinners. Number 3, we see the pain and ruin of being sinned against. That's Tamar. Number 4, we see the promotion of sinful activity. This is David. This really is David promoting sinful activity. And you know what? Too many of us as parents, in not disciplining our children, are promoting sin by not doing anything about it. You are essentially giving license for your children to continue to do it by doing nothing about it. It will not go away. It's not just going to go away. David is a promoter of sinful activity by doing nothing. And maybe for David, it's because it's hard to strike the gavel of justice when your own hand has been maimed. What do I mean by that? Was not just chapter 11 the story of David who blew it in every turn? He's probably like, how can I judge my own child when I'm guilty of the same thing? So he does nothing. He does nothing except be angry. Angry is not enough. This is what we would call a parenting and a leadership fail. This is it. Another one. He's just like Eli. Eli in 1 Samuel, in the book previous to 2 Samuel, in chapter 2, we see Eli having also some wayward sons who are out whoring around and sleeping with women and making a mess of the rule and reign of Israel and their witness and the presence of who they are as God's people. And he's making a mess. And he does nothing for his sons either, which is essentially in doing the same. He's promoting. He should be chastising his son, protecting his daughter, and not that. Listen, I'm 150 pounds soaking wet full of food. I have 2 daughters, but I guarantee anybody who hurts one of my 2 daughters, I'm gonna weigh like 250. I'm gonna come at you. If I have to nibble at your knees, I will. But he doesn't even protect his own daughter. I know you love your daughter. I know you love your daughters, and you love your daughters. But David's just angry. He's just angry. Do you see what's happening here? Psalm 146:7 is a good reminder to us about the execution of justice. But who's going to do that for the oppressed? It's certainly not David. He's not doing that, and he's the king. If the king won't do it, who will? Who will? So we look to the Lord. Maybe he's thinking of Leviticus 20:17. Leviticus 20:17 says, if a man takes a sister, a daughter of his father, or a daughter of his mother, and sees her nakedness, and he sees his nakedness, it is a disgrace, and they shall be cut off in the sight of the children of the people. He has uncovered his sister's nakedness, and he shall bear his iniquity. Maybe again he's thinking, I really can't do that because it wasn't done for me, so I guess I will have to extend the kind of grace I was shown. I guess I will do nothing. Do you see David's parenting fail here? The answer is head shaking yes. Matthew Henry here says what I think we've only seen too clearly. Quote, godly parents have often been afflicted with wicked children. And this is what he says, it's so powerful. Grace does not run in the blood, but corruption does. Grace does not run in the blood, corruption does. This goes back to the original sin, Genesis chapter 3. See, in a sense, David is reaping what he has sown. And it's heartbreaking still. I concede that. And it's life damaging for sure. And in all this, I remind you, church, who is listening, God is using the evil acts of these individual players for his purposes without being the author of evil. He will use the wicked, evil acts of others for his purposes. Just like we saw with the life of Joseph. You meant it for evil, but God means it for good. The hard part is we don't always see how God is intending things, even though it might be very painful and difficult. Again, God will permit these acts, but not cause them. As I've thought of my own sin and my own weakness and my own proclivity to lust or whatever it is, and if you're honest and sober about your own evaluation of your own life, I think more of Romans 1 every day. And I just pray, God, do not give me over to my own sin. Because I'm horrified enough of me than even having the persuasion of another sinner to come and add to the flame. I have enough desire and temptation in me to take myself straight to, I don't need anybody's help, so stay away from me. I'm kidding about that, but you know the force. We must be careful. Well, the fifth thing in our text before we're out of time is we see the protection and the preservation of sin's objects, those who have been hurt. Because sin will hurt others. Sin will hurt me, sin will hurt you. You will hurt me with your sin, I will hurt you with my sin. We will hurt each other sometimes. But we should look to protect and preserve and care for others. And this is Absalom, so far Because what Absalom is doing is taking her into his house. He's going to bear the cost. He's going to be her protector. He's going to be her caretaker. He's going to love her. He's going to serve her. He's going to make sure she has security, that she feels valued, that she's not discarded, that she's not making her living as in a prostitution setting. He's going to do and bear the burden of his sister. This is Absalom. He's protecting, he's preserving her. He loves her. He will console her. He will love her. He will serve her. He will honor her. Psalm 59, verse 1 and 2. He will be the one that functions as a deliverer, functionally in a sense. Deliver me from my enemies, O my God. Protect me from those who rise up against me. Deliver me from those who work evil. Save me from bloodthirsty men. This will be Absalom at the moment. Well, what we have done so far in this text and in every other text, we've observed the ongoing effects of sin, haven't we? All of us have sin that affects our life differently at times. For the believer in Jesus, that's heartbreaking for us. At the same time, for the believer in Jesus, we know that there's hope. For the non-believer in Jesus Christ, your sin will be the weight that will bury you eternally in torment and damnation. The whole thing of all these sinful activities in these sinners is reminding us that we need a greater David. We need a new son of Jesse. We need a new Redeemer. We need a new deliverer. One who won't act as the human ones have acted. That's Jesus. Which then made me, after I finished my sermon, I came back to add a sixth person. And there's not a sixth, but I added him. Number 6. What this text is doing for us is reminding us about the preparation for sin's prosecutor and the payer, the person who will pay for sin. Who is this, do you guess? This is Jesus. This text is anticipating for you Jesus Christ. And he's only going to be one of two things at the end of time. He's either going to be prosecutor and judge, or he's going to be the one that comes to pay for your sin. It's one or the other. One or the other. That's what the text is pointing us to. John 12:48. For the person who's not trusting in Jesus Christ, who's trying to make it on their own, the one who rejects me and who does not receive my words has a judge. This is Jesus referring to himself. I have spoken and will judge him on the last day, and my word will judge him. So that's for the non-believer. And yet for we who place our faith and trust in Jesus Christ, we have the words of 1 John 3:5 that tells you that he will pay for your sin. You know that Jesus appeared in order because so that, therefore, to take away sins. And in him there is no sin. This is great news, my friends. As we close our time together, you can probably, like I have seen, I have been maybe any of these 5 people at different times of my life, haven't you? Or sometimes I've stood up for those who needed protected, and I did the thing I should have. There were other times where I was the one that made a mess of my life. And there were other times that I was finding tears upon myself because someone grievously hurt me. And there were other times I found myself being either the one that was giving poor counsel or the one who was receiving it. Can you relate to this? I think you can. Well, we're out of time this morning. I encourage you today, if you who are here today and you are in anywhere near proximity to any kind of activity like Amnon, in any kind of sin, any kind, turn from that sin and turn and run and flee to Jesus. The scripture says, all who come to me, I will never turn away. Flee to Jesus. Allow him to pay for your sins. Let us pray.